Hello, and hello everyone, wherever you are. Yes, going beyond. I've got a few visual aids here, so I just thought I'd introduce you to the visual aids. I don't know why, but Bhante wanted to turn up in this form. Now, apparently, so can you pan out and just show the people on Zoom? Now, apparently, I'm sure many of you will be familiar with this form. Apparently it's called the, I'm not going to get this right, mythophanic psychopomp. Is that right? The mythophanic psychopomp. Visually it's quite striking, isn't it? He's sort of drawing us into these realms. So I thought it was quite an appropriate image to take us beyond. And my other little visual aid here is a Nagasidi house. It doesn't actually come from the exhibition, but it's a very similar concept and theme, I think, to the exhibition. Sorry, I moved from the mic. Don't worry if you can't read the sign on the house. It will become apparent. I will tell you what it means at the end of the talk, what it says at the end of the talk. But this, folks, is a symbol of bodhicitta. Put that down there. So, going forth and going beyond are very linked. And this weekend, we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of Bhante's going forth. And as has, I think, been really well picked up on already, one of the striking things when you hear about accounts of Bhante's going forth is the delight, the joy, the confidence. As Pamavajra said, a sense of inspiration that he has, with which he sets out. Yeah. So, although of course setting out is full of challenges, but he's far from disheartened. He's not downhearted. He's setting out because he's drawn to something. He can taste freedom. And it's a freedom so profound and all-encompassing that it was worth dedicating his whole life to, and ultimately, actually, all of our lives as well. So in the first part of this talk today, we're going to explore this taste. Bhante talks about it in terms of texture, doesn't he? Of texture and mystery. So we're in the territory here of liberation. What happens when we let go forth, when we leave the prison walls behind? But we're also in the territory of metaphor. So by necessity, it's a poetic evocation. Bhante calls them broken hints. This reality is utterly unwordable, ungraspable, with no possibility of containment or delineation of any sort. But if we don't take it all too literally and let the metaphors do their work, we may find that some of that texture, some of that mystery of shunyata can rub off. Yeah? So, having said that, I hope it will also be of some practical use. So in the second part of the talk, we'll look at some of the many ways that Bhante has given us to engage in the process of going beyond. Yeah? So effectively, we're looking at what does it mean to go beyond, and how do we do it? Okay, and we'll break those two parts up with a mantra in the middle, just a short seven times mantra, and it will become obvious what that will be. Vandika will lead it for us. And then just a couple of minutes of absorbing that before I go into the next phase, the slightly longer phase of the talk. Okay. So to start with, we're going to use the metaphor of shunyata. So shunyata is translated often as emptiness. Although I always remember Ratnashuri, who at the time of my memory was a venerable Dharmacharani of 80. And she came out of a meditation and she was saying, emptiness, rubbish, it should be fullness. which rather succinctly points to the qualities of vividness and aliveness and distinctiveness that seem to go hand in hand with the ungraspability and lack of solidity. Yeah? So I always like to bear that in mind when I talk about emptiness. So Bhante reminds us that shunyata was originally the Buddha's communication of his transcendental awakened experience. Yeah? It's an experience, and it points to the way in which we may ourselves experience that truth. Yeah? He says its sole purpose is to take us across the waters of birth and death, yeah? The deathless. Yeah? And he says that it has no significance apart from that. Well, that's all right by me. No significance apart from the deepest alleviation of suffering. That's fine. He says, quintessentially, it's a matter of experience. Yeah? Quintessentially. Sorry, can you hear me? Is it possible to do anything about that at the back there? No. You want me to speak louder and lean into the mic? Okay, like that. Is that better? Okay. I don't know how much of it you haven't heard, but I'll keep down here. Okay. So he says that it's quintessentially a matter of experience. Yeah? All the perfection of wisdom text deal with shunyata as a direct experience. And he talks in terms of the 4 shunyatas, the 4 different stages of unfolding the mystery of the nature of experience. So let's start with samskrita shunyata, emptiness of the conditioned, the compounded or fabricated. Or you could say the tendency to turn experience into an object, which we then grasp at. Samsara. So what is samsara empty of? It's empty of the possibility of satisfaction on its own terms. It's empty of permanence, stability, persistence through time. Because when we look, we cannot actually find any solid, stable entities, any things that would be capable of persisting through time. Yeah? So being good Buddhists, we are familiar with some version of this. Yeah? The lakshanas, right? Because we know this, we go forth. We go for refuge. But certainly for me, even though it feels like on some level I know this through and through, I keep acting as if it were not the case. Yeah? I keep acting as if permanence and satisfaction could be found in tinkering with or manipulating what I think of as samsara out there. Yeah? So I'm patient to a point, but I reach my limit, and I don't want more COVID restrictions now. Thank you very much. So with a sore heart, I come to accept parental deaths, but not those of younger friends or people who have looked after themselves well. And I don't want people dying in hospital without their loved ones present. And at a deeper level still, I'm constantly fabricating, reconstructing my reality, affirming my existence, protecting my belongings, rehearsing my opinions and my centrality. And this is automatic. It's an automatic, rarely conscious, and very powerful response. So a lot of our practice involves working with the kleshas, the stranglehold of fabrications that hold this core sense of self so firmly but evasively in place, robbing us of our clarity, sapping our energy, and blocking our sensitivity and responsiveness. It involves bringing more and more of us into play, working holistically to address the whole person, and growing our confidence in our unlimited, dynamic, ungraspable nature. So secondly, asamskrita shunyata. Asamskrita, the uncompounded, unfabricated, and in that sense, as Bhante says, not artificial, sometimes called nirvana. So this is the affirmation that when we are not fabricating, constructing our world and being, we are not creating suffering. When we are not creating separations and divisions, especially the fundamental division between I and other, we live a very different experience, live in a very different world. We can get a taste of this possibly through our yidam, or our connection with the Buddha, sometimes through open-hearted and agenda-free communication, that breath of the Dakini, through our response to the beauty of the Dharma, literature, living natural world, arts and poetry. We can feel its texture. We can be called by its mystery. So when we use terms like samsara and nirvana, it can seem like the stakes are high. We are writing things in capitals. If it's not one, then it's the other. If it's not nirvana, so it must be samsara. And it's true that one is empty of the other. And they are mutually exclusive. But the nature of existence that we are talking about here has no solidity, no fixed entity. We are talking about process, about the dynamic nature of mind, of the world of experience. There are no separate entities of samsara and nirvana in different places with different contents, just two radically different modes of perception. When we perceive dualistically, partially, with even a very subtle bias, samsara is present. And when perception is non-dual, not separate, freed from self-reference at the deepest level, a totally different relationship and interpretation arises, which we call nirvana. So if we want to stay true to this dynamic, ungraspable nature of existence, we need to recognize that the samsara we experience as external, out there, arises out of a particular way of perceiving. Of course, as I've said, this is a very powerful, deeply ingrained way of perceiving. Yeah? It's evasive, deeply rehearsed. Yeah? But I have found it really helpful to take on board that there can actually be nothing fixed or solid about it. Yeah? It's not possible, because nothing is like that. And the fundamental component of that samsaric tendency is clinging or tension. The split or separation or dualistic differentiation which creates the tension is not something inherent in the situation. It is something that we are adding or creating. So experientially, and let's not forget that this is a teaching of experience, an exploration of experience. Experientially, we can start to notice, to feel into where we are holding on, where we're creating that split, solidifying, fabricating, constructing or confecting our world or sense of self. Yeah? And with awareness and an open heart, we can do what Bhante has called unhooking from the Trimandala. Do you remember the grasper, the grasped, and the act of grasping? Yeah? We unhook from the object of clinging or tension. We unhook from the subject, the one who is fabricating. And we even unhook from the label for a particular emotion or experience that we are engaged with. So maybe this can give us a taste, a glimpse of the third level of shunyata. This is mahashunyata, great emptiness, where all opposites are confounded. We need to recognize the deeply provisional nature of all conceptual distinctions. Even the distinction between samsara and nirvana becomes redundant. They don't have ontological, independent reality of their own. They are a product of dualistic thinking. In experience, as we become more and more at home in the dynamic, unfolding mystery of each moment, we can increasingly feel a subtle tension. We feel the restriction, the limitation produced by holding on to ideas such as coming or going, or even ideas of anyone to go, anywhere at all to get to. All such assumptions, no matter how subtle, obscure the mystery and open-endedness of the living experience underneath. And with the fourth shunyata, the texture of reality gets even subtler still. Even the subtlest level of Nyaya-varana, those veils of obscuring views responsible for our tendency to separate, even this, the subtlest conceptualizing, is at an end. There is just sheer, naked, self-illuminating awareness of how things are. As Bhante calls it, following Vimalakirti, he calls it the thunderous silence. Shunyata, shunyata. The emptiness of shunyata itself. And Bhante has explained the Gate Gate mantra in terms of the four shunyatas. He says, Gate, gone beyond the conditioned, gone forth from the conditioned. Gate, gone beyond to the unconditioned. Paragate, gone beyond any distinction between the two. Parasangate, gone altogether beyond any construction, fabrication, or subtle formulation that separates us from the naked experience of how things are. Bodhi Swaha. Just do.
Gate, gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhi swaha. Gate, gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhi swaha. Gate, gate,
So I hope I've said enough to give you a flavour or a taste, a feel for the texture of going beyond. And enough to know that we're talking about metaphors. And we need to hold this concept of going beyond itself very lightly indeed. So let's now take a look at some of the ways we have to engage with this territory. I sometimes imagine Bhante returning from India. I think he's described feeling full of blessings, full of the many gems of teaching and practice that he had been showered with, but wondering how he could even start to share them in a way that would have a lasting effect. His answer was to create an order that was based on a radical vision of how we can go beyond. The whole system of practice that he created is designed to help us do this. It's designed to give us the opportunity to go beyond suffering in a deep and sustained way. A way that includes every aspect of our being over the entire course of our life and lives. So I want to look at different areas of the system of practice and pick out some of the many, many ways that can bring about this radical going beyond of ourself, for ourselves and others. So we'll start with integration. In the early days of the order, looking around at the enthusiasm and energy for the Dharma that was gathered around him, Bhante quite quickly saw that sustaining our practice was going to be a key issue. I feel so fortunate myself to have grown up in the movement at a time where it seemed that there were abundant opportunities to live such a complete Dharma life. And I do feel intensely grateful to the Dharma pioneers who made that possible. Again now, there's starting to be more and more opportunities emerging. But I think we've learned we certainly can't take those for granted. So, of course, living in a Buddhist community and working together in right livelihood won't in itself ensure that we are going beyond in our practice. But it gives us a really good context to do so if we keep motivated and keep steering to the deep. Living together, working together, or taking on projects invites all our samskaras, all our tendencies to the party. We may have really deep insights, but how fully can they impact us, and how long does their influence last? Well, that depends on how integrated we are, what sort of forces in our being are pulling in other directions, dancing to other tunes, or just going at different speeds. It's like the crowds at the side of a marathon race. We cheer for the front runners, but we want to get everybody across, everyone over the line. All the walkers and limpers and the charity runners in their clown outfits with water pistols. For our Dharma life to have meaning and significance, for others as well as ourselves, we need to be in it for the long term. And yes, I am happy to talk about lifetimes. For a radical and lasting transformation, work with the kleshas and samskaras is essential. The different aspect of our Dharma activities and ethical life help us in this transformation. Taking on projects, friendships, confession, in fact the whole of our Dharma life is a going beyond practice, if that is our motivation for engaging in it. Yeah? I'm sure you're all very familiar with this. In fact, Padmavajra, I think, brought out a very similar point. It's the lifeblood of the movement, isn't it? But it's worth highlighting it in this context because it's a really powerful tool if we do keep refreshing our motivation with open-hearted awareness. So another aspect of integration that I just wanted to mention in this context is Shamatar practice. I know some people have been exploring this more specifically again recently, and I'm really pleased that's happening. For a while for me, in meditation practice, dhyana was fraught with difficulty. The more I wanted to experience such states, the more will I engaged, and I do have a lot of will. I threw myself into the practice for a while, to the exclusion of all else. And I wondered why I just felt more grumpy and more of a failure. I then decided that that was because my ethical practice wasn't effective enough. But however hard I tried on both fronts, I couldn't seem to experience any remotely expansive states of mind. And I was just full of self-criticism and despondency. So eventually, I gave into meditation as just being a way of processing the day, really. I could say a lot more about this, but for now, I just want to say to anyone for whom this rings any bells at all, rest assured, it really doesn't have to be like that. It really doesn't. We can all open to increasingly expansive states. And I just, in relation to going beyond, I want to highlight two specific benefits of Shamatar practice. So on an energetic level, Shamatar practice can harmonize and heal. Bhante talks about vertical and horizontal integration. It can free up energy for deeper integration of all the superficially conflicted aspects of experience. When the mind is clear and settled, conceptual fabrication naturally lessens. I can have a sense of more and more of the whole being, wholly attending, to borrow from D.H. Lawrence. So when understanding arises, there's less and less to block it, dilute it, or take it off in other directions. There's more of us available to be affected. And it has a correspondingly more complete and lasting effect. So it's for this reason that it's traditionally suggested that we can use more absorbed states of mind to make pranidhanas, those heartfelt wishes for practice for the benefit of beings. Because when we do it from this state of mind, those wishes carry more weight with this level of integration. So secondly, in relation to Shamatar, I'd like to bring us back to this dynamic model of mind and how the world we live in is a function of perception. Different states of samadhi, different dhyanas, can lead to very, very different experiences of consciousness and the world. There are apparently a vast number of these altered states that have been recognized and catalogued, including those that we know of as the 4 or 8 dhyanas, which can be entered into by setting up the right, very specific conditions for each one to arise. So for me, the interest lies not so much in exploring each specific state, but in recognizing how deeply our construction of the world can change, can differ. So it can feel like the grass, the flowers, the trees are pouring out love from their own side. Yeah? It can feel like, the habit of seeing in 3-dimensional perspective can dissolve. Boundaries around objects disappear. Location, size, time, all dissolve. And the more we experience such states ourselves, directly, in person, the more confidence we can build in the truths of the Heart Sutra. Yeah? It challenges our deep assumptions that the way we see things from our deluded, partial, self-referential perspective is how things are. And this confidence is a huge help to our to motivation for practice. It's a huge spur for going beyond. Okay, was integration. The others are shorter, don't worry. So in terms of going beyond with positive emotion, the second aspect of the system of practice, well, again, there's just so much that could be said. So many of us spend our lives living in a more engaged way with others because we care, because we love, because we have a sense that this is where the deepest freedom and meaning lie. Our practice of spiritual friendship and metta helps us to keep that care alive, authentic, engaged. It also gives us conditions where we can move more and more from a perspective of me and mine to a perspective of us and ours. So because samsara and nirvana are a function of perception, the more inclusive our lives, the more we live in a connective, non-separated world, the more this very world becomes a lotus paradise. This very body, a Buddha. But, however much we care, however engaged we are, life doesn't always feel like a lotus paradise. Wherever we are in the world right now, it can feel very far from that. It can quite literally feel like the world is on fire. So if we want to go beyond, go deeper in times like these, our metta practice needs to include a particular focus. So we're familiar with metta in relation to beings, to others, to people, to our friends, to our enemies. It's certainly hard enough to really take others in on their own terms, to let them into our hearts, to connect and empathize, and to be authentically moved by their suffering and then act to alleviate it. But even this is not enough. As we have seen, no matter how we act, beings suffer, worlds burn, and we can easily feel overwhelmed and impotent. In the Jewel Ornament of Liberation seminar, in the chapter on benevolence and compassion, Bhante refers to the fact that we can also practice metta with the Dharma as reference. Here, as in the Bodhichitta practice, we reflect on the fact that these beings who we so passionately want to help, in the words, these are the words of Matchik Lapdrong, a 13th century yogini. So these beings that we so passionately want to help, they don't understand that all phenomena lack even a hair's tip of true existence, that they are like a dream, like an illusion, and holding on to the truths of confused appearances, they create unvirtuous karma and experience the consequences, unbearable suffering. It is by freeing them of this deep self-referencing that the deeper causes of suffering, which cause the world to relight its fires, will be addressed. So for me, there's a sense of real patience, nobility, flexibility of heart and mind of the Bodhisattva, full of understanding of the complexity of human existence and the suffering that arises, love undiminished, remaining connected, remaining spacious in the face of this, interested, even bringing relief, lightness, joy to the situation. And practically, going beyond with metta and bodhicitta will involve all the practices connected with strengthening our love and care, all the beneficial activity we're engaged with on the one hand, and on the other hand, also at the same time, deepening our understanding and experience of the way things are. So we're building up both these aspects until they naturally arise together. And as you can see, we're already moving into the territory of insight, the third aspect of the system of practice. The territory of working with the Nyaya Varana, the veil of those fundamental obscuring views, those deep assumptions that keep us building the prison walls. And this is central to the practice, of course, of going beyond. So Bhante has outlined various insight practices, including the six-element practice, the contemplation of the Nidana chain, the contemplation of the root verses from the Bardo Thodol. He also mentions Chur practice, contemplation of the decomposition of the corpse, and the lakshanas, which we looked at earlier. So all of these have their place. Methods are very helpful. But what fundamentally brings about insight is an aliveness to the underlying assumptions on which we construct our deluded view of the world. We need to address the root causes of ignorance, the third and deepest level of dukkha, skandha dukkha, the dukkha created by holding on to an idea of our separate selfhood and all that arises out of that. The dukkha of ignoring, holding out against the dynamic, ungraspable flow of life, of trying to control it or fight it. It's the practice of addressing the deepest causes of suffering, directly looking at ignorance. And although it's helpful to loosen our grip on all of our habitual tendencies, it's these deep views, these Nyaya Varana, I have a body. I am separated from the world. I am going to die, which hold the fabric and structure of our worlds together, which ultimately cause most suffering, because they cause us to rebuild our protective habits and tendencies, if they're not freed. As Bhante says, we can move the furniture around in a room, our superficial behavior, but that won't actually remove the prison walls unless we change the basic structure of the house. So we can't really have a guidebook here, a map of mystery, if you like. But with practice and increasing confidence in the taste, the texture of just how it is, we can build our intuition, our feel for the dukkha or tension in body, speech, and mind, which obscures that. It's possible to get a feel for where and how we're holding on, constructing, fabricating, even at deepest levels. This moment, right now, is so much more than what we might describe as personal experience. When we open up in all the senses, it includes so much sound, vibration, sensation, visual stimulation, resonance. We can let the focus shift from the content, the story of what's happening now, to its nature. We can feel the vibrancy and aliveness, even enjoy the creative capacity of awareness. It's mysterious unfolding. If we find ourselves getting caught up in the story, we can drop in subtle micro-reflections. When is this past or future happening? Does there need to be an I to be experiencing right now? Inside? Outside? Or as we get more of a sense for what the words are pointing to, just even where, who, what will do. That's enough. So above all, these questions, they don't need answers. Yeah? They don't need answers. Their sole purpose is to open things up and reduce the fabricating. As we notice how well it functions, as we notice how well everything functions without our usual reference points. Yeah? So we start to get more interested in what is constant and true of all experience, the quality of it that's always there, the underlying universal mechanisms that cause the suffering start to become more apparent. And once these mechanisms show themselves fully, and we experience them directly as suffering, they can't persist, because it takes our active involvement to recreate them afresh in each moment. So to take the example of unhooking from the Trimandala again, we can feel how that view organizes experience into a perceiving subject confronted by a separate object. And that always produces a problematic relationship between the two of them. We can feel how we need to have all three elements in place: separate subject, object, and an idea about how they relate to one another, to produce tension. And how, if we unhook from any one aspect, me, other, investment in story, the delusion as a whole is weakened. So as you're sitting here listening to this, you'll be having your own experiences of curiosity, boredom, enjoyment, confusion, disagreement, and you deal with that by whatever way you do, by attending more or walking out, which quickly takes away the object, the trigger for the boredom. But you could also take it as an opportunity to notice how you are creating the tree mandala right now. Out of a string of sights, sounds, physical sensations, mental movements. Yeah? Feeling into, even unhooking from the trigger, from the me experiencing, experiencing. Yeah? Sorry, I'll say that. I didn't say that well. So you can feel into either. You can feel into the unhooking from the trigger. I suppose in this case that's me, isn't it? Or from the me experiencing, or from the story of your response. Yeah, the description of your response. Okay. So, in relation to the fourth aspect, how am I doing? I haven't got long. In relation to the fourth aspect of the system of practice, spiritual rebirth, Bhante comments, insight arises through visualization of a Buddha or Bodhisattva, not because it is an image of the transcendental, but through recognizing what it is, both real and unreal. I'll say that again. Insight arises through visualization of a Buddha or Bodhisattva, not because it is an image of the transcendental, but through recognizing what it is, both real and unreal. Both real and unreal. We're in the territory here of appearance emptiness. Yes, as the fabrication lessens, we see that there is no own being anywhere, no solidity, nothing even that is flow or has consciousness, nothing that comes or goes. But in a way, it's still real, in the sense that there is sharpness, distinctiveness, aliveness of experience. This is sometimes referred to as luminosity, but that's not so much in the sense of light, more in the sense of being clearly apparent, vivid. So just as the barking of a dog is distinct, has an impact, the appearance of the yidam is full of colour, qualities and energy, and all that impacts us. And this impact and influence grows the more we open to it. But at the same time, it's completely fabricated and has no solid being. So the point here is not that it's valueless because it is artificial, but that it's communicating something about the nature of all experience. Dogs, dinner, lovers, war. All are both real and unreal. So finding an authentic connection with the yidams, these messengers from beyond, keeps our hearts, our souls engaged and stimulates our imagination. It activates different aspects of our being and allows us to resonate with deep truths in a very complete and satisfying way. Again, it's as if we can bring more of us on that sort of those deeper levels of integration, vertical integration. We can bring more of us into the party. Sorry, I know we're not supposed to be having parties anymore. But still. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas demonstrate for us what it's like to live without craving. Yeah? Living embodiments of awakeness. How would that be? How would that be to live without craving? How would that be in colour, sound, qualities, creative symbols? What's that like? What does it taste like? What's the texture of that mystery? So the encounter with each specific figure has a very specific impact on perception. With each and every one, a very particular texture of reality is strongly evoked. Although it is, of course, completely unwordable, and of course they do all have the same taste of freedom, but again we can get a glimpse of how profoundly, how radically the world changes with these shifts in perception. Yeah? When we spend time in such different worlds, it will rub off in ways that we may not rationally understand or even directly notice. And it goes way beyond a personal connection. Like in the entreaty and supplication section of the puja, I like to feel that honouring these awakened qualities, however it is we do that, taps into this vast, ageless flow of blessings and makes it possible for that to have an influence in our Saha world. So practically speaking, the ways that we do this will be a very personal thing. For me, the practices of sadhana, mantra, and engaging in creative rituals are amongst Bhante's most profound and far-reaching gifts. Okay, so we've had many words and come a long way. I can't find the last page in my book. There we go. We've had many words and come a long way. But of course, we haven't actually gone anywhere at all. Where and who is there to go? Maybe our hearts have responded to Bhante's setting off on his journey 75 years ago. Maybe we, like him, have a glimpse, a taste of the mystery, to be lived beyond all these words. And the more confidence we can build in that, the more these deepest levels of construction, of fabricating, will fall away. And if we don't cling or identify, we don't even need to avoid fabricating. It can be there or not. Our only problem is identifying with it. So here we enter the territory of the last stage of our system of practice, spiritual receptivity. We can let wisdom and compassion meditate. No need to hold ourselves separate from them. Love with no reference. No beings, no dharma, no label love. We have gone beyond any sense of going beyond. We can come home. We can come home to loving awareness, its mysterious unfolding, the naked experience of how things are, shunyata, shunyata. Without fighting the constant change and ungraspability that's everywhere. It becomes our deepest refuge, our most secure home, the thing that we can really rely on. And as well as being the most secure, it is also the most unlimited. It is the Bodhichitta. It includes all beings. So at this point, I'm going to read you the sign on the door. Here we have it, the Bodhichitta House. And the sign on the door says, "Everyone is welcome to enter and be free."